So basically, we are trying to, the way we use the environments in school, we are trying to see how we can think about immersive worlds in beyond just the default ways of using them that we see. I say this because given the fact that we are at SMU right now, and given the fact that I come from, my colleague and I come from Singapore, so we know that countries like Finland and education systems like Shanghai and South Korea score very highly in international comparison tables like TIMSS. One of the reasons is that there's high-stakes national examinations, which Singapore and Korea are very well known for. However, the flip side, the corollary of having these high-stakes national examinations is sometimes what is being assessed, okay, does not necessarily fit well with what the students experience from day to day. Okay, this is quite an important point because this is the motivation behind the work that we do. So what is being assessed is not necessarily aligned with what the students experience from day to day. And this can result in certain, so basically my first question to ask, because it's meant to be a workshop, you don't have to, you've all just come back from lunch, so they're all quite quiet, but so you don't have to get up and jump around. But at least think with your, either consider for yourself, or if you want to, you can discuss with the person sitting next to you. What results when the everyday experience of students and the formal assessment do not align? Okay, I mean, you can think back to your own experience as maybe as graduate students, hopefully not here at SMU, because hopefully the SMU curriculum is aligned with your interests, because you can choose which modules you want to study. But maybe in school, but back when you were in secondary school or in primary school, maybe some of the things that you were assessed on did not align well with your own experience as an everyday person at home or at a shopping center. So this is Singapore. I just got this map on the internet. Never mind about the watermark here. I don't know what ezealand.com is. It's just so I Googled this and I got this from the internet. But I chose this particular map because it illustrates something which is quite critical to my point of the talk today. And that is, I would like you to notice that there are parts of the coastline which appear to be unnatural. So, in what ways? Does anything strike you about the coastline of Singapore that appears to be an unnatural coastline? You can use east or west or north or south, but there are parts of the coastline which are not natural, and it's important for us to discuss why.
South.
Okay, the south. Thank you. Which part of the south? So I'll move south, and then you stop me. Okay, you stop me. I'm almost reaching the north. Stop. Okay. So what is it about this part here which appears to be unnatural? What is it about this part here which appears to be unnatural? You can say it in Korean and have it translated.
Rectangular here. I think the shape of straight lines.
Yes, the straight lines.
Yes.
Yes, there are many straight lines, right?
Yeah.
There's straight lines all over the place. Look at this. Look at this. Yeah, and even here, there's actually this lake here, but they've straightened it. They've put a little thing here. So yeah, there are many parts of Singapore which are straight. And this this kind of leads to a problem because look at this huge thing here. So I chose this picture because I want to try to help you understand that for children living in Singapore, they don't have a lot of experience of natural geographical processes. Okay, they don't have a lot of experiences of natural geographical processes. You may say, oh, but Singapore is not the only small island. There's Manhattan in New York, or there's Hong Kong, and all these are small islands. But the difference between Singapore and Manhattan, and Singapore and Hong Kong, is that even if a child is living in Manhattan, the child would have a rough understanding that Manhattan is placed within the larger state of New York. So there's upstate New York, there's Buffalo, for example. So there's the more rural parts of New York State. And then New York is actually placed within the Northeast Corridor. So even if they haven't traveled to, even if they haven't been to Massachusetts, or even if they haven't been to Buffalo, they would have a rough understanding that, oh, there's other parts of the world apart from where I'm living in. But because Singapore is not only an island, but it's a country as well, so it's a little bit different for children living in Singapore. Likewise with Hong Kong and China. So this is a very extreme example. And this is an example of, it's a canal, obviously it's a drainage canal, which is built to be a very efficient channel. But for those of you who are engineers and hydraulic engineers, you will know that if you concretize all these things, and if you build something so straight, actually what you're doing is that you are potentially worsening the flooding, because there's no, basically the water cannot erode concrete, and therefore all the energy of a high, if you have high tide, the discharge of the water, there's very high energy, and it's just flowing down or flowing which way, and you're just basically passing the buck of the energy, the erosive energy down further downstream. So you're not really solving anything. And the next picture looks more natural. But even then, so would you say this is a natural stream or not? It's a trick question, so you know the answer. So would you say this is a natural stream or not? Oh, it's a trick question. I'll try this again. Would you say this is a natural stream or not? It's an artificial. That's brilliant. Okay, you are able to see through. You are able to see through the trick. Very good. Now I know why you're a doctoral student. Yes. Okay, you should have passed your PhD. I can sign off your PhD right now. So it's actually an artificial environment. My point is that. The point I'm trying to make is that even when Singapore tries to do natural, it's still an artificial kind of natural. So for example, okay, I'll just prove to you it's artificial. Okay, so this is a newspaper picture. It's a newspaper graphic of the same environment that we saw just now. Okay, and this natural-looking environment cost 76 million Singapore dollars to create. I mean, it's a huge amount of money just to make something look natural. But even then, so what I'm trying to say is, if the geography students were to walk around here, and they would be, their understanding of their intuitions, they pick up understandings of river flow, erosion, weathering, deposition, but what they pick up is not necessarily what would happen in a natural river, because the meander is not a natural meander. Maybe the meander is designed to work that way because so that it can fit nicely into the surrounding area. Because if the meander were natural, maybe it would go this way, but it can't because there's roads here and there's housing here. So the engineers meandered it this way. So whatever they're picking up is not an accurate understanding of how things work. Look at this. Okay, it's just meandering this way because it's a nice even meander of equal curvature, which may or may not work out in real life. I mean, in a totally natural form. And then, so from there you get, but the problem is that the students are still expected in their formal examinations to come up with representations such as these. And these representations, they may or may not be accurate, but they're based on very shallow understanding. They're based on extremely shallow understanding because for those students who can come up with an accurate representation, the only reason they come up with an accurate representation is because they have studied, they have spent hours memorizing the textbook. But do they actually pick up the representation from walking around Singapore and from interacting with the environment? They don't, because there are very few opportunities to walk around Singapore and interact with a natural environment, because most environments are all straightened. So my point is that in Singapore, for geography at least, and that's the reason we started with geography, it's difficult for students to make the connection. Okay? So the everyday experience of children growing up in Singapore does not give them many opportunities for developing intuitions about geographical processes in nature. Yet, they are assessed on their understanding of these same processes in the national examinations. So we tried to think about how to help the children, and we gave them an immersive environment. So for example here, this is an avatar, like you can see on your computer screen. We gave them a blank piece of land, and we taught them how to terraform. So the students themselves, they lowered the land so that the students themselves made the river system that you see here. And they made this little lake here. Okay? So it's like using Photoshop, because we just taught them how to lower and raise the land. So, however, this particular photograph shows a problem. And you will only notice it's a problem if you happen to have a passing understanding of geography. So don't worry, I will give you the answer. I'm giving you the answer now. This is known as an oxbow lake. Okay? Now, if you are a student of geography, you will know that oxbow lakes are generally associated with a meandering river. So, the student who formed this area obviously memorized from the textbook that if you are forming a meandering river, you must also form an oxbow lake. So the student nicely formed an oxbow lake. However, the position of the oxbow lake with regards to the meander is wrong. Okay? The position of the oxbow lake with regards to the meander is wrong. And if the student really understood the process of meandering, the student would know that the oxbow lake should actually be further down here. It should not be at the same apex as the meander. Okay, because this shows this is very unlikely to happen in real life. The oxbow lake should actually be down here or further up there. But it should not be at the same apex as the meander. Okay? So here's an example, here's a very good example of a student who is trying to apply what he or she learned from the textbook, but still applying it in a naive way, in a yet to be developed way, because he or she doesn't have the appropriate understanding of the processes, because they don't get to see a lot of natural environments in their daily interaction. So the next point of discussion is, we don't have to discuss it since we're not really in the mood to discuss anything, but we can pretend to discuss it in our minds. The next point of discussion is, within your own area of specialization, what intuitions might some novices have, and how might these intuitions have come about? Because not everybody here is a geographer. I happen to be a geographer, but there might be some mathematicians here, there might be some physicists here, and so on and so forth. So just maybe spend a few seconds thinking about the kinds of intuitions that students new to your discipline bring, and what were some of the factors which form these intuitions. Okay? I'll give you an example. So, if I had a glass of water, which I don't, it's fine. If I had a glass of water, may I borrow your cup? Don't worry, I won't touch it. No, don't worry. Okay, so there's a cup here. For those of you who can't see it, just trust me, there's a cup. Now, if I were to apply pressure to nudge the cup, we all know what would happen, right? And it would spill on your lovely shoe. So, we all know what would happen. And how do we know what would happen to the cup? We know what would happen to the cup because when we were children, we would have spilled things, we would have dropped things, we would have got scolded by our parents because we have broken things. And so as children, we developed a very primitive understanding of gravity, of inertia, of friction. But it's a very primitive understanding, but it's an understanding nevertheless. But so we know that certain things will happen in certain ways, but we don't necessarily know why they happen yet as children. So it's only when we go to school, when we go to formal education, then we learn about the principles of physics, in this case about Newton's laws, and so on and so forth. Then we understand, we learn to codify our intuition. Okay? So that's an example of intuitions from physics. Okay, but sometimes our intuitions let us down. But and I gave you an example of that. Okay, so tying back to the work that we do in Singapore. So since 2009, we've been using this framework to help teachers design learning environments within virtual worlds, which give students opportunities to express their emerging conceptual understanding. I know this is a very long sentence, but it's important, so let's deconstruct it. So we help teachers to design learning environments within virtual worlds, wherein the students can express their emerging conceptual understanding. Their emerging means it's not yet well formed. There may be some mistakes in it, but it's still fine because it's emerging. It's possible to form and to shape. The teachers, in dialogue with the students, can shape the conceptual understanding. Okay. So you can think about it this way: if you like painting, or if you like any form of performance art, like music or drama, you can think of these environments as canvases, as a blank canvas, or not necessarily a blank canvas, but as some kind of canvas, a piece of paper or a whiteboard on which the students can express their understanding. So rather than use the environment as a complete structured activity, we design for gaps in the environment, we design for mistakes in the environment, so that the students can help to fill in the gaps. And by trying to fill in the gaps, the students make their own mistakes. Like if you see here. Now, for this one, if the designer had less of an if the designer had less of an understanding of how to use a virtual environment, the designer would have pre-formed a perfect river. And then all the student had to do would be to explore the river, and to hopefully by exploring the perfect river, the student would somehow understand what a river is. Okay? You will understand that in the lower course, the gradient is gentle, in the upper course, the gradient becomes steep, for example. But that's not how we do it. Instead, we give them a blank piece of land. I will show you an example later. We give them a blank piece of land, and then we teach them how to shape that land. So instead of giving them a textbook, we actually give them a workbook, so to speak, a digital workbook, a three-dimensional workbook. So we don't give them a three-dimensional textbook, but we give them a three-dimensional workbook, and then we let them play around with the workbook. So in this way, students' thinking and intuitions, which would otherwise be largely hidden, are made visible because they make mistakes, and by making mistakes, they help the teacher, but the teacher must be alert. Because if the teacher isn't alert, the teacher will just say, oh wow, you formed a nice oxbow there, very good. But if the teacher is alert, the teacher will understand that there are problems with the positioning of the oxbow. So it would help these intuitions be surfaced because they are normally hidden, and then can be dialogued about with either their peers or their teacher. So learning is more enduring because first principle understanding is built. Because you get to form it yourself, you get to do it yourself, rather than just simply exploring a perfect environment, which is how some virtual environments are designed. Okay? So I spoke a little bit about intuitions here, and basically this slide is simply to tell you what we are. It's an ongoing project which my team and I are working on together with Dr. Cho, and we are developing a theory known as disciplinary intuitions, because and we find this important to do because if teachers can be more aware of the intuitions that students bring, then they can design for more effective learning. Because very often we don't want to assume that you're here, for example, us here. We are each coming from a different background. We each come from a different story. We each bring our own narrative to the room today. So none of us here is all as the same as anybody else. So I can't remember any of your names. So I didn't know Yuen Ming, but Yuen Ming is not the same as somebody else in this room. Okay, and his story is not the same as your story. So each of you bring your own different story. So teachers need to be more aware of the stories that students bring. Or if you're working in a corporate environment, the trainer or the consultant needs to be more aware of the individual stories that the clients bring. You don't treat everybody the same. But the problem is, of course, that many of the intuitions are hidden. They're tacit, right? Okay, is the word tacit anyway? No, they're not tacit. Okay, so many of these intuitions are tacit. So they need to be surfaced in order for them to be dialogued about. Okay, so I've got the next 3 slides are basically so we started in 2009 with this understanding about the problem about learning geography in Singapore, and then we grounded this in intuition, and we did it with lower secondary, which means about 13 and 14 years old, in computer labs, with certain academic abilities, and in the formal curriculum. This was in 2009. And then what we did was, as the program grew, we realized that actually we had to. I mean, sometimes teachers wanted to take it into directions which may or may not have been. We needed a way of checking whether the directions that the teachers want. We needed a way of checking that the directions in which the teachers wanted to take it were true to the original spirit of the program. So that's why we came up with this framework called the 6 Learnings Framework, because it kind of makes sure, it's a way of checking that if you want to grow a program, and this applies to any program that you want to grow. For example, when those of you who are doing your doctoral research, I'm getting tired. And it's only halfway through. But those of you who are doing your doctoral research, if you want to scale up your program, if you want to scale up your research, you need to make sure that how the next phase of your research is still aligned with your original intent. So you not only need a theory, but you also need a strong framework so that you can make sure that it can diversify here. In fact, the more diverse here, the better for you. the more diverse, the better for you. But it must still be, there must still be a way to bound it to make sure that it's in alignment with your original intent, so that any translation or any diversification is still coherent with your original intent. Okay? So this is how it eventually developed. Now, so the framework I will illustrate, and here we start coming to the pictures part. Okay, so subsequently there's quite a number of pictures. The framework I will illustrate by showing you pictures, because this is the easiest way to say it rather than to try to expand it by text. So essentially, what we've done here is we've tried to help you, we've tried to suggest to you the various ways in which virtual environments, immersive environments, can be used for learning. And I would like to humbly suggest to you that most of the time, if you look at what many institutions are doing in virtual environments, they are primarily using it only for these two. Very few learning interventions explore these. Primarily, they're using it for this. In terms of, so for example, an example of learning by exploring is you build a perfect rendition of something, and then the assumption is that when the avatar walks around, the perfect rendition, somehow by magic, the student will have a better understanding. So it's just as if, I've given you an example of that. So collaborating, I talked about the virtual conference table. But then we want to look at some of the others as well. So here, learning by being, we look at identity, which goes beyond role play. I'll give you an example of learning by being and the others. Okay, so in terms of a pictorial representation, I find it best to express it this way, because I put 5 here, and then there's one, the 6th one is as an offshoot. The 5 here and the 6th one is as an offshoot. So just very briefly, why did I organize it this way? Right at the center is the learner. The learner's evolving identity. Okay? So these 5 here, building, exploring, collaborating, being, championing, if in a well-designed environment, they feed into each other, and they eventually feed into helping the learner have a stronger understanding. I'm getting very tired. Helping the learner have a stronger understanding of I mean, if the learning environment is well designed, then it meets the objective of the environment. However, the 6th one here is learning by expressing. So whatever happens in this circle is the learning that happens within the virtual environment or the game. Okay, for those of you who are interested in game development. So whatever happens here is the learning that takes place within the game or the virtual environment. But there's another separate form of learning, which is when the learner tries to express his experience within the game or the virtual environment to an outside audience. Okay, this is important, huh? And since I've got my wind back, I shall say it again. There's a totally separate form of learning, which happens when the learner tries to take his experience from the game or from the world and express it to an outside audience. A very simple example is if a child or your student uses the virtual environment at school, and then the child goes home, and then the parent asks, "What did you learn in school today?" So the child would say, "Oh, today I went into a virtual environment, and then we did this, 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 and this." So if you think about what the child is doing, the child is trying to represent his experience of what he did to his parent. And in order to do that, he needs to have, at least, I'm not saying I'm just saying that it's a different kind of, he needs to activate different things in his brain in order for him to represent something, okay? To someone who did not participate It's one thing to represent, for example, all of our computers are on now, right? So if all of our computers are on now, and then we all go into the world, we all would have a roughly similar experience because we all would be doing similar things. So if I ask you to talk about it in your tables, you all would have no problem talking about it in your tables because you all would have roughly explored a similar environment. But if you were to take your experience today and go out of this room and talk about it with your colleague who was not present in the room, it would be a different form of the way you express your understanding means that you have learned, you are trying. It's like, I think you understand my point, but just one last point. It's the best way to help someone learn something is by asking him to teach it to someone else, right? Okay? So yeah, so that's learning by expressing. Okay, so here, from here on are all the pretty pictures, okay, so no more text. So in this particular picture, we have, this is an example of learning by building. So here we have a 12-year-old, 12 or 13-year-old boy who's, who within the first hour of using the virtual environment, so we didn't tell him to build an Angry Birds. We simply taught the class how to build basic shapes, like in this case a sphere. But you will notice that there are other things apart from the sphere. There's the eyebrows. So the eyebrows are not spheres. So we taught him basic shapes. We taught them how to color, and then we just left them to do what they want. Then this particular boy, he has two things open. Firstly, he has his virtual environment window open, and then he has his Internet Explorer, the browser, the web browser open, and he went to Google and he Googled Angry Birds. So, and then so basically, he is okay. The reason we didn't give him a directed activity was because we were simply just allowing them to familiarize themselves. But this particular boy chose to do something which was of interest to him, and he, within the first hour, started to was able to build this. And what you're actually seeing, these guides, is he's actually trying to rotate. What is at the center of the green circle? The center of the green circle is the eyebrow, right? So he's actually trying to rotate the eyebrow to make sure that so basically he's, so this is an example of learning by building, because he's learning to apply concept, whether he realizes it or not. And as a 12-year-old boy, he probably won't. In fact, he hasn't even learned probably about trigonometry, like sines and cosines and degrees and radians. But actually, he's having opportunities to pick up understandings of why trigonometry and rotations are important. So basically, we're giving him opportunities, whether or not he realizes it, to develop intuitions about the importance of certain basic mathematical concepts. Now, so in this example, it's also learning by building, but so here you can see that the learner has built this artifact out of wood, and I'm giving you the answer, although I should not. But anyway, so what he has done is he's trying to represent his artifact in the virtual environment so that students from other schools who are not present with him in this school can also have a look at the artifact and can also help him to improve the design. So what he has done here is he has actually done, I believe he's like done some kind of simple I don't know, it's well, there seems to be whatever structure he's built. Okay, I was going to say bookends, but actually it doesn't seem to be bookends. But anyway, never mind. So yeah, so basically, so this is another, this is a slightly more advanced learner. He's had more time to, because obviously he's already built this. So he's using the environment through learning by building also so basically he has to think about how to, he knows how to, he's already done this, but he needs to think about how to design for a curvature here, and how to have these hooks on either end, and how to make the hooks aligned, because they could be off. And by learning by doing all these things, he's actually learning about how to make things symmetrical and stuff. Okay, so this is another example. So just in case you think it's only for boys, this particular picture shows a group of young ladies from another school. I know you can't see it properly, but I'll show it to you what they're doing. These are actually literature students. So they are literature students, and they what the teacher, because we designed these environments with the teacher. So what the teacher requested for is, she was doing Romeo and Juliet with the class, and she requested that we help her build a representation of the Globe Theatre. I know you can't see this clearly, it doesn't matter. So to build a representation of the Globe Theatre, so that now, but it's more than just role play. Okay, so the default way of using a virtual environment for literature would be, oh, okay, let's all pretend to be, I'll be Romeo and you'll be, I can't remember the other characters, I'm very tired. Yeah, I mean, apart from Juliet, I mean, okay, so maybe the friar, or maybe the Capulets or whatever. Okay, so anyway, so and then we just pretend to fight, or we pretend to woo each other over the balcony. Romeo, why art thou Romeo, and so on and so forth. The rose by the young name. So that could be one way of doing it, but the teacher actually did it in a very exciting way, because so there were actually two steps to her to the learning intervention. What she did was, she used the virtual environment as an intermediate step to getting them to think about stagecraft and the production of the play. So those of you with a little bit of experience with Second Life, you will know that the camera does not automatically by default take these views, right? Those of you who have a little bit of experience, you know that you need to position the camera in order to get a view like that, or a view like this, and definitely of a view like this. So they need to put themselves in the position of the director, of a producer, of the playwright. Which particular camera angles bring out the most effective message of whatever is being said? Okay, so the camera angles is one. The second one is, after you do that, as you are doing that, you need also to think about how to arrange your pictures to bring for greatest dramatic effect. So it's in this particular instance, the students chose to arrange this panel this way, and then this one and this one. But it could easily just as well be, if the student had wanted, or the group had wanted, this whole panel could be extended so that they could show this as a full body shot, and then this one would be smaller. So the students need to think about other aspects of the play. They need to deconstruct the play and to really get to grips with the play, and then they express it. They express these understandings through a comic strip. Okay, so there are actually two things going on here. The first thing that's going on is that the students are using the environment to understand to understand stagecraft and to understand the play in Shakespeare's time, because they were actually they need to think about the size of the stage in Shakespeare's time, the size of the globe. They need to think about the seating, where the audience was, and so on and so forth. Then the second thing they need to do, in this particular case, is to represent the play in a form which students who were not participants in this class, in other words, their schoolmates from another class who did not take part in this particular intervention, yet they can still understand it because they've expressed it in a comic strip. Okay. Now, for geography, one of I'll give an example from map literacy. So in geography, one of the primary problems for geography is how to represent a three-dimensional form in a two-dimensional way. So you have a mountain, or you have a valley, or any set of other things, and then if you want to represent them on a map, as we are all very familiar with, because nowadays Google Maps and representations are so common and so easy to access, we need to somehow, the student needs to somehow look at these lines and make sense of them, so that in his brain, in his or her brain, when the student looks at these lines, the student doesn't see these lines but actually sees the mountain. One more time. Huh? The student needs to look at these lines in such a way that when the student looks at these lines, he doesn't see these lines as lines, but he actually sees the mountain in his mind. Now this is not easy. This is really not easy, as you can probably guess. Those the guys, you would have gone through national service, right? Have you gone through national service yet? Have you gone through national service yet? You have, right? I'm sure you have. Is it before or after university? It's before, right?
In the middle of.
In the middle of university. So when you go to national service as soldiers, and you need to be able to read a map. And when you're in the middle of a jungle, and you see these lines, you need to not be able to see these lines, but you need to be able to imagine the terrain so that you can plan your strategy, right? Okay, but you know it's not easy. So the traditional way that geography teachers try to help is by providing the students with a model, maybe a plasticine model, a clay model, and then they have these transparent perspex boards. That's one way to do it. Okay, of course the really cheap way is just to represent it on paper like this. But that's only not terribly effective. So I know this is another blurry shot, but one way that we've used the virtual environment to do this is we form different shapes, we form different landforms in the environment. Again, in consultation with the teachers tell us they want this particular landform and that particular landform, and they want it steeper and they want it gentler, and so on and so forth. And then we provide what we call contour planes, which bisect these landforms. And you can see that it's true to scale because these are avatars. The avatars are all on the mountain, and some of them are on the plain. And we allow the students to control the contour interval of the plane. So sometimes the plane is down here. In this particular case, the plane is down here. Then when the student presses a button, the plane can go up, and can go up, it can go down. So what the student needs to do is he needs to trace the outline of what he sees on a piece of paper. Okay, so we give them a piece of paper with a cross so that they can have a point of reference, and then at each particular contour height, they trace the contour as what he sees, because we teach them how to view from the plan view. So instead of giving this is back to what I said about perfect environments. Instead of giving a perfect representation of a plateau, or of a valley, or of a conical hill, instead of giving the student a perfect representation of an example of this, we do it the other way. We give them a blank piece of paper, and then we get them to draw their own contour lines. And as they draw their own contour lines, they're drawing it in conjunction with what they see on the screen. So they therefore they are able to see the contour shape taking place in front of their own eyes by their own hand, because they are the ones drawing it. And then their mind makes the connection between what they are drawing and what they see on the screen. So they are building up first principle understanding of in this case, contour lines. So instead of the teacher teaching them, oh, when you see that the lines are close together, that means it's more steep. So when you see the lines are close together, it means it's more steep. That sentence is meaningless. When you see the lines are close together, it means it's more steep. When you see the lines are further apart, it's a gentle slope. When you see that the lines are progressing from steep to gentle, it means it's a concave slope. These are all meaningless statements. These are meaningless statements. Until you actually start drawing it, you're trying to draw it yourself, then you see, oh wow, look at this. So I can see, oh okay, this is it's because I'm on the more gentle part of the slope. That's why my lines are that way. Okay, then they make their own connections, the learning is deeper. Okay, so I told you earlier that we give them a blank for the river. Remember the Oxford example? We give them a blank piece of land, and this is what I mean by a blank piece of land. So in this particular case, there are 10, because typical class size in Singapore is 40 students, so we break them into groups of 4. So we have 10 groups of 4. The avatar, as you know, is already about size, so it's a 30 meter by 120 meter piece of land, which you cannot do even in Korea, let alone Singapore. You can't give a group of students a 30 meter by 120 meter plot of land. And even if you could, you couldn't allow them to build hills and valleys of that plot. So here we do it using the virtual environment, and then you already know what it looks like. Okay, so so for example, the students will say, by terraforming, it really helps us understand the properties of the landscape. And likewise, this is much more believable because it's much more impactful. So we've already seen this, and so this is a plan view of this. Yes. Okay, because it's not formed yet. Huh? So after 40 students have had a go with this, after you get 10 times 4 groups, this is what results. Okay, so this is what I mean by a digital workbook, a 3-dimensional workbook. It's much the same as, but of course it's more powerful because the students are operating at it in a true one-to-one scale. It is not the same as I am presently drawing on a piece of paper my river. It's not the same because from the brain's point of view, they are actually walking about a 30 meter by 100 meter piece of land, and they're actually deciding, okay, this should be this and this should be this, and it's a 30 meter by 120 meter piece of land. Okay, and then they can control the vertical height to about 40 meters. So here's very interesting. I like this particular photo because it shows that everything is the same yet everything is different. Okay, everything is the same in the sense that here you have 10 different examples of a drainage basin. So everything is the same. It's a drainage basin. Yet everything is also different because you have 10 different examples of a drainage basin. The drainage basins are formed in ways which allow the students to express their own creative understanding of what drainage basins should look like. So for example, here you have this and then you have that, which is more accurate actually. And then you have those which emphasize the delta and so on and so forth. Okay? So all these can be dialogued upon because the students can visit, after everything is finished, the students can visit each other's basins, and the teacher can visit each other's basins, and the teacher can discuss with the students, the groups, why did you choose to design it this way? Why did you why did you choose to emphasize this and not choose to emphasize that? Okay? So the last discussion point is, so far you've seen a few examples, quite a number of examples. So I want you to think about what kind of possibilities you yourselves have regarding these the examples that you've seen, and apply it to your own case. Okay? Now, the last part for today is site visits. So I know that your computers are already on, and some of the computers are on an environment which Dr. Cho has designed. So that's fine, but I'll just give you a few pictures of environments which I've designed with some of my friends and colleagues from other parts of the world. So I'll give you two photographs. The first one is I've done, some of my friends have designed with me a field study center, and another group of architects, primarily from Japan in this case, have designed a marine ecosystem environment. Okay, so I'll give you photographs of both, and then if we have time left over, which we will, we can either take it through questions or through exploration. So, firstly, the Field Study Center at Boundless. Boundless is the name, Farwell is the name. So for those of you who are familiar with Second Life, which is the virtual environment that we're using today, you can find them on the world map. So you just go to open your world map, type in Boundless and type in Farwell, and you can see where they are. So for example, you'll see something like this. Okay, so this is a picture from the world map. This is just a small section of the world map. in Second Life. Boundless happens to be up there. Okay, so that's an area which we've developed, and other people have developed other areas here. Okay, so yeah. So this, I can't get the computer to give me a better resolution than this first. Anyway, so the pictures I'm about to show you are from this island here. Okay, there's a volcano here. There's a kind of a space station here, which is but that's another story. There's a mangrove swamp here. There's a coral reef here, and there's a weather station. There are two weather stations actually. There's one weather station here, and there's another weather station here. The reason why there are two weather stations is because I'll show it. It's easier to show it to you. Now you can explore the whole. You can explore the whole island by taking the train, and the train goes around the whole circuit of the island. Okay, that's one way to explore it. You can also explore by flying or walking, but exploring by train is pretty cool. You can also explore by boat. Okay, and yeah, okay. So so here is an example of a coral reef environment. Now the coral reef environment is it's not just in this particular case. In the case of Boundless, the reef environment is actually a custom. It's more than just a perfect reef. It's actually divided, when you visit it, it's divided into 5 parts. And each part is designed to simulate a different kind of threat to the reef ecosystem. So there's overfishing, there is there's dynamiting, there's toxic pollution. So at each part of the reef, you can, there's a station, and then you press the button on the station, and then that part of the reef will show you what happens to the reef when there's dynamiting or when there's a rise in the temperature of the water. So you will gradually see, for example, if there's a rise in the temperature of the water, you will see that the diversity of the fish gets less. The health of the reef will worsen because as reflected through color changes in the environment. So these are all basically, it's not just a perfect reef. It's different kinds of threat to reef ecosystem. So that's the reef. Can you guess what this is trying to show? I know it's a little bit difficult. Just guess. What does it look like? Or rather, what do you see? You tell me what you see and I'll guide you to what it's actually trying to do. What do you see? Collapsed building. Okay, thank you very much. You see a collapsed building, okay? And you see a collapsed building and it's kind of fallen down on a bed. So this part of Boundless represents actually an earthquake simulation. There's a building behind here, which you can see the balcony of over there, which when you walk into the building and someone presses a button, the whole building will start to shake. And because you're an avatar, it's like the whole room here, well, obviously, hopefully nothing will happen now, but it's like this whole room, Camellia, is going to shake and things will start falling down on you. And then you will get, that's one, of course it's not a perfect way, but it's one way to experience for those of, for example in Singapore, we live in a very tectonically stable region in Singapore. So the children in Singapore have never actually experienced an earthquake. And it is just, we're not saying it's a perfect way, but we're just saying it's one way for them to have a rough approximation of an earth. And this thing here is actually a pose ball. So for those of you who have been to in Second Life and explored, it's a pose ball. So if you click this, if you click the ball, your avatar will curl up. Your avatar will curl up, and it will curl up within this small space here. And it is called the triangle of life. So if an earthquake were to happen now, what would we do? Well, I would go to the doorpost, right? Because I'm trained to do that. Because if we live in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, we know that if an earthquake happens, the doorpost is good. Or if you're not near the doorpost, also be at the back. All you need to go is to crouch down beneath the table. Okay? So you crouch down beneath the table, and that is your triangle of life. Because basically it is supporting you. So that's learning by being, because you're actually, your avatar is actually taking the correct position that you should in a real emergency. Okay? So over here, this is pretty obvious, but okay, I know it's not terribly, but you can actually explore inside the volcano, and then you can hear the sounds, and you can't smell the smoke, but you can. Okay, there's actually something hidden inside the volcano, which I shall reveal to it's kind of James Bond, okay? It's very James Bondian. I've hidden something inside the volcano. Now, this is the mangrove swamp, so I'm just introducing you to different parts of the Field Study Center. Okay, I think. Yeah, one of the reasons behind having a mangrove swamp, even though in Singapore as a tropical environment we do have mangrove swamps, is that they're not very easy to access. Because almost by definition, if you think about it, if every day several busloads of students come to your mangrove swamp to visit your real mangrove swamp in a real life environment, after a couple of years, your mangrove swamp will no longer be a mangrove swamp because it will all be trampled. It will be totally dry. All the moisture will be squeezed out because your students will become trampling all over the mud, and the mud will gradually sink, as you know. Okay, it will be compacted. So as the mud compacts, the moisture kind of. So I'm not saying again that this is a complete replacement for a trip, but it's a good approximation of it. And this is the weather station. This is one example of a weather station. And I said we have two. The reason we have two is because at balance, I've scripted the weather such that we can we can have on-demand weather. It's like when you fly Korean Air to, again, San Francisco, you have the audiovisual on demand. Even if you fly economy class, because Korean Air is such a great airline. Okay, so you have, just as you have AVOD, audiovisual on demand, here in the virtual environment you can have weather on demand. So you can call up different kinds of weather, or you can have there are seven dots here, and each dot is clickable, and if you click on any of them, they call up the weather, the real-time weather for that particular city. Okay, so there's Sydney, Singapore, Pyongyang, Cairo, Vienna, Dhaka, and Reykjavik. So if you click on any particular dot, the real-time weather will be simulated in this area, and therefore you have two weather zones because you can have simultaneously two different types of weather, and the student can compare the two. And so, for example, these are weather measurement instruments. You have cloud density, you have solar incidence, you have wind speed and wind direction. And here is just a simple example of learning by collaboration, in the sense that I'm sure you know, in the case of many virtual environments, you can have people from all different parts of the world, from the UK, from Japan, from Singapore, and we can all be talking about discussing similar things. Okay, so and I like this particular photo because it shows the dugong. So it shows the dugong, and if you look at the previous picture, the dugong is actually here, and his name is Dugong Janus. So you don't necessarily, just in case you don't know, but I'm sure you know, you don't necessarily have to take a human form. You can actually take non-human forms. Okay, so and actually Dugong is a very talented person because he's one of the main architects of Farwell, the marine environment, the marine ecosystem installation. So here we see jellyfish, but more than the jellyfish, we actually, let's talk about this cool thing later. I don't know whether anyone recognizes this cool thing. If you recognize this cool toy, please let me know, because we are more or less of the same generation. But if not, the main thing I want you to focus on is this whale skeleton, because what the architectural team is trying to do here is trying to help bring a, because we can't really go it's physically impossible for us to actually visit the deep abyssal depths of the oceans. So here we are trying to show, we are giving a representation of what goes around comes around. In other words, what happens when you die? The remains of the whales get basically it's a representation of the kinds of ecosystems that we will never actually get to see. And over here is another interesting thing. I don't know what you can just barely make it out, but it's a tussle between it's a tussle between a giant squid and a sperm whale. And here again, we don't actually get to see such things in real life because we can't. Okay? Does anybody recognize this toy? It's from, do you know the Belgian comic Tintin? Some of you may have heard of it. Anyway, red sea sharks. Okay? Okay. So, and this is my final picture. This is also from Farwell. We have different kinds of cetacean. We have minke whales, we have sperm whales, we have humpbacks. And it's actually a very beautiful place. Okay, this is Farwell from the surface at sunset. Yes. Yes.
I'm listening correctly from Hannah.
Oh.
And yeah, I'm a master's student and I'll ask several things. And first is just the basic question.
Yeah.
So is it like, are you using the Second Life as it is, or kind of like changing?
We're using we're using Second Life as it is, in the sense that we have islands that we buy. Sometimes we buy from. Yeah, we're using Second Life as it is, but we're also increasingly moving into the open source version of Second Life as schools want to take it up for their own children, for their own students. So we're actually adopting a two-pronged strategy. Both, yes. Yeah.
And my second question is, you have talked about like first on like geography point of view, and then like develop into other
So other areas.
So what kind of things can you do with the Second Life setting besides the geography?
I think it depends on the learning objective. What you as either the instructor or the consultant or the teacher, what you yourself want to, what kind of, so I've tried to show you a variety of examples. Okay, firstly I acknowledge that for geography it's quite easy and natural to use a three-dimensional environment because because geography is essentially talking about space, and a three-dimensional environment is by definition a spatial environment. And therefore we go back to the 6 learnings because we connect. I've tried to help teachers understand that if their discipline is not so much about space but about, say, applying mathematical understanding through building and through architecting, that can also be one way. I showed you the Angry Birds example as a very simple example. And then the literature example was designed to help, was an example of learning by expressing basically. We have In today's talk, in terms of the framework, we've talked about learning by exploring. I gave you many examples of learning by exploring. The earthquake simulation was an example of learning by being, and then we talked about the literature example was the learning by expressing, and then the design and technology example was learning by building. So these are 4 ways in which, but it really depends on what the client. I use the word client because I know some of you will become corporate consultants. So it really depends on what either the teacher needs or the client needs, and then you need to make but offhand you can't really give a definitive answer unless you yourself are familiar with what the environment can and cannot do. So you need to invest a little bit of time to understand what the environment can and cannot do. The environment is not good for certain things. So for example, some teachers want to use it to simulate physical principles like acceleration, or what happens when a moving body collides with another moving body, and the kinds of forces that take place. For those kinds of learning outcomes, a simple Java applet or some kind of a Java application would be a much better way to bring these kinds of things across. So we are not marketing it. Well, I'm not marketing it at all because I'm not even. I'm not academic, but we're not trying to say that it's a solution to many problems, but it's a solution to some problems. It's a very good solution to certain problems, like for example the terraforming and the map contour lines one. It's difficult to find a good alternative solution for those kinds of things, because I didn't go into the theory, but the theory is that I talked a little bit about the scale, right, and why the scale is important. Because it's very different if I'm looking at a model of something, if I'm looking at a model of a mountain, but or if I were actually walking up the mountain. If I were walking up the mountain and if I'm just examining a mountain, I can say, oh, this part of this slope of the mountain is gentle, this slope of the mountain is steep. But if I'm actually walking as an avatar up, it's very, because what I did not go through is there's a theory which you can read about by James G.E.E. It's projective identity. You can Google it now. It's basically saying that whatever happens to the avatar, the learner takes it as happening to himself. So if I'll repeat that because it's quite key. Whatever happens to the avatar, the learner takes it as happening to himself. So if the avatar is finding himself walking up a steep slope, there's effort required if the world is well designed. Of course, if you're talking about a world where, I'm talking about, if the world is well designed, if the avatar were walking up a steep slope, he would be walking up slower than if he would just be walking up a gentle slope. So not only is the avatar walking up slower, but the learner feels that the learner's mind, he is expending effort in walking up that slope. So he feels the slope is steep. He doesn't just observe that the slope is steep. He's actually feeling the effort of expending the energy walking up the steep slope. So in certain kinds of for certain kinds of learning outcomes, virtual environments are very useful. But it's a difficult question to answer because it really depends on the context of the context of the learning that either you or the client wants. Yeah. Did you have a third question? Because you seem to have. Yeah.
Yes, I have a third question.
Please.
And
Yeah.
a final question.
Yeah, sure.
But first you kind of mentioned about like artificial river, and for me it kind of feels that if you can like touch the water and you can like be there and
Sure.
walk around,
Yeah.
it feels more
Authentic.
real
Yes.
than
Yes. Certainly. So that's why I agree with you. The point is that it's not a replacement for field-based activities in the real world. Definitely not. So it's more to do with addressing problems of logistics, or because obviously that's why I gave you the mangrove example, because if everybody goes to trample on the mangrove swamp or the coral reef after a while, you know. So that's one aspect. But also the other question that the other advantage that's related to this is that it allows for repeated because for a field trip, supposing coming to Korea to study to do field work or to have a conference trip here, I can only do this once or at the most twice a year. But if we have it as a virtual environment, we can go there on multiple occasions and keep practicing what we are supposed to be experiencing. Yeah, so it's not. Yeah, so it's complementary but not mutually exclusive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think you explained well that learning by expressing means learning by expressing their own experience to others, especially parents. I think expressing is a too lower level of acting or communicating. So how about include the managing or understanding, for example, understanding others' experience or other situation and regulating their own experience is more in a higher level.
It's empathy and
Yes,
negotiation and yeah, those kinds of communicative skills. Yes, yeah, quite yeah, perfectly valid. Yes, fair enough. Thank you very much. Yeah, hey John.
Yeah, so about change,
Yeah.
learning by expressing to regulate.
So I invite you to take my work and change it. And yes.
Thank you so much.
Right, you can actually publish your own paper and critique my work. And then we can both pad up our CV because I will write a critique about your critique. But thank you seriously.
So do you have any other questions? Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time today. Thank you.